Welcome, everybody, back to the Legends of Sport podcast. I'm your host, Andy Bernstein. Happy to be bringing episode 2 of our Restarting the Clock series to you. This episode is titled The Long Goodbye. 22 NBA teams arrived and are training inside the ESPN Wide World of Sports bubble at Disney World in Orlando. Scrimmages are starting with the restart of the pandemic-shortened season beginning at the end of the month. Our guests today are two good friends and NBA veterans in their respective fields. So great to get their perspectives on this unique situation in the history of the NBA and sports in general. Our first guest is Gary Vitti, the longtime Lakers head athletic trainer. His book, 32 Years of Titles and Tears from the Best Seat in the House, is a must-read and a terrific look behind the curtain through Gary's eyes and memories. Gary shares his views and expert opinion on what it will take for the bubble to succeed and how the NBA has prepared to keep everyone healthy. Our second guest is veteran NBA journalist for Bleacher Report and host of the Full 48 podcast, Howard Beck. So great to hear Howard's take on what is happening and what we could expect from the teams and players in the bubble. I hope you enjoy this episode, and as always, I'll see you on the backside. Welcome back to the Legends of Sport podcast, my good friend Gary Vitti. How are you, G?
All things considered, Andy, we're doing better than most, and we feel blessed that we're fine, we're healthy.
Yeah.
My family's in good shape right now.
Yeah, thank God. Hey, listen, I want to open the show by showing you what I'm wearing. All right. Do you recognize this shirt?
Yeah, that was one of my taping shirts.
Yeah.
Did you get
Stole
stick
it.
fingers?
I stole it.
Yeah. I think I left it behind after my last game, and
Exactly.
I left the arena, and you swiped it, right?
Right. Well, this is what happened. With all due respect, yes, you left it in your locker, and I couldn't let it sit there and have somebody, God forbid, throw it away. Right. It was your last game, April of 2016. Right. And I took it, and then I told you I took it, and I asked you if you wanted it back, and you said no, you could keep it. So I wear it pretty often. It's a little big for me, but makes me think of you.
I hope you washed it after you swiped it.
Right? Yes, and sanitized it. Yes, I did.
Yeah.
So, Gary, we're doing this series co-produced with the LA Times now, and it's called Restarting the Clock. This is episode 2. We're talking about this whole situation of the NBA restarting the season in the bubble in Orlando. So by the time this airs, all 22 teams will have arrived in the bubble. They've gone through their quarantine. They're practicing. They're starting to scrimmage, and they're preparing to restart the season with 8 games that will determine, the playoff seeding, right? At the same time, the COVID-19 cases are spiking like crazy all over the country, and especially in hot spots like Florida, where we're going. You wrote in your Vitti Report blog on May 15th that at that time, there were 140,000 cases in the U.S. Today, there are over 3 million cases with 134,000 deaths and counting. Which is just mind-blowing. The worldwide numbers are off the chart, over 12 million cases and over 550,000 deaths. What are your overall thoughts of how the pandemic is being handled in this country and what we should be doing to flatten the curve here in the U.S.?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. And, I also wrote in one of the blogs that if anybody tells you that they know what's going on, they're lying to you.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is new territory and everything is data driven. And so as more data comes in,
Mm-hmm.
Then the picture becomes either clear or more muddled, okay? Which it has been. And that's been exemplified by, you wake up one day and you read things in the news, and people are saying certain things, experts, and then just a couple of days later, all of a sudden they're saying completely different things. So it's not like they were lying to you, and it's not like they didn't know. They knew what they knew at the time.
Right.
And so as more data comes in, then we learn more.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take Italy, for example, and they got hit really, really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And what they did was they really shut the country down. I mean, to the point where it was like a police state.
Mm-hmm.
You could not leave your abode without special papers.
Mm-hmm.
You had to have sort of direction as to where you were going and why you were going there, and you were being stopped by the police. And if you weren't following the rules, I think it was like a €3,000 fine. And I mean, they really, really put the place on lockdown. And as a result, they have really cornered this thing, and they're doing very well with it, and they're doing very well with their recovery right now.
Right.
Now, you look at our country, and we started out pretty good, and I think everybody knows this, but if they don't, let me say this: that the whole social distancing, mask, quarantine, lockdown, all of that stuff, that wasn't created to kill the virus. All that was doing was slowing the infection rate down, meaning that we may end up with the same number of people that were infected, but we spread it out over time. And the reason why that was important was because our healthcare system couldn't handle a surge of a lot of people getting infected at the same time. In theory, if everyone was infected at the same time, the infection rate would go sky high. There would be herd immunity. The virus would burn itself out. But the problem with that is a lot of people would die.
Yeah.
So because you couldn't, you didn't have enough ventilators, you didn't have enough all the things that you needed.
Yeah.
Okay. And so we did pretty well flattening that curve out because, everybody was scared and they did the right thing. But then as that curve flattened, somehow there seemed to be sort of a misunderstanding of what was going on out there, that this is not a fatal disease. It isn't for most people, but for some it is. And it can make some people very, very sick. And some of the data now is that you may end up not a fatality, and maybe not even that symptomatic, but you may develop some lifelong respiratory issues. Someone that's never had asthma before, they might have asthma now for the rest of their life because they've compromised their respiratory system. And so somewhere along the way, when we started going into phase 2 of this recovery, people got the wrong message. And phase 2 was supposed to be, well, we're going to start opening up society, but we still want to distance ourselves. We still want to wear masks. We still want to follow, some guidelines to keep everyone safe and limit the spread. And apparently what happened was, as soon as we opened up, people went berserko, no masks, congregating in large groups, very, very close together. And as a result, now we're seeing not just a spike, but a huge spike.
Yeah.
And this is really, really scary. And now you have two factions. People think it's a hoax, and it's become a political football. And it's really unfortunate. But, I just don't see how you argue with the numbers. The numbers are going through the roof right now.
Yeah, I hear you. So as a longtime NBA head athletic trainer, I'm sure you've got some specific thoughts and concerns about the unique situation that the NBA is undertaking in Orlando. So if you were with the Lakers or any other team right now and not living the life in retirement, how would you have approached keeping the players in shape during the long layoff, both mentally and physically? And do you think there'll be any significant, unique situations like injuries you might not have had in a regular, NBA season down there in Orlando?
Yeah, you might be surprised at my take on this because, as you know better than anyone, as long as you've worked in the NBA, Andy Bernstein really didn't have a life. You had a schedule. And if you work in professional sports, it's all about the schedule. So if you look at a regular season, we play 8 preseason games, then we play 82 regular season games, and then, we go ahead and start the playoffs. And then once the playoffs start, that usually runs from about mid-April to mid-June. So following the last game of the season, we have the draft. And so there's, players coming in all the time, working out. And then following the draft, we have Summer League, and that takes up so the draft, all of June, and then all of July for Summer League. And so the dead time for the NBA is the month of August. And then around the first week of August, and I always say Labor Day because labor means work, okay, right around Labor Day, the gym is full. Guys are coming back because that gives them about 3 weeks to get ready for training camp. Mm-hmm. And training camp lasts 28 days before the first game. So if you really look at what's going on here, they pulled the plug on March 11th. They made an agreement on June 23rd. They're going, individual workouts started around July 1st. Training camp is going to be somewhere between July 9th and July 21st, depending on what the teams want to do. And then they're going to play their first game on July 30th. Mm-hmm. And so if you look at the calendar, okay, which is what you would do because you've been in the NBA, your whole life is a calendar. It's not a life, it's a schedule. It all works out pretty well for these guys because they played about 65 games, give or take. Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, you can't help but be beat up after 65 games, no matter how great a shape you're in. That's a lot of games to play in this particular sport. And so, given the time off that they've had since March 11th, all those aches and pains are gone. I mean, everybody's pretty much feeling good. Mm-hmm. And so now if you just sort of fast forward through the dates that I talked about, you're right around what we would consider Labor Day. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Yeah.
And now you're going to go to training camp. Okay? and so, it's a level playing field because all 22 teams that are going in are in the same boat. Now, are you in as good a shape as you were at game 65? Okay, no, obviously you're not, but everybody else is the same. And so it's just like going into the NBA season in basically September, October, November, mm-hmm. but you're doing it now in July and August. So you're just moving the calendar, but basically the number of days and the weeks are about the same. Mm. Now, what's a little bit different is that when you start, say, Labor Day or, the first day of training camp, which is about 3 weeks after Labor Day, we look at it as a marathon. Well, now it's not a marathon, it's a sprint. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But there are some interesting things. For one, if you look at the longitudinal data of injuries in the NBA, they usually happen later in the season as your body fatigues, and there's probably a travel component that's attached to that. So you've taken the travel part out of it. Mm-hmm. Okay? So everybody is going to the same place. The other issue that creates is that these next 8 games that they're going to play, normally in towards the end of the season, you're looking for home court advantage. Well, that's gone out the window because everybody's playing in Orlando, so there is no home court advantage. Mm-hmm. So basically, these 8 games are just about seeding. Mm-hmm. Who are you going to play? And so it's just a little bit different of a mindset than what you're normally used to. Mm-hmm. But I'm thinking that all these players are going to come in pretty rested. All their aches and pains are gone. Any injuries that they've had have been treated and rehabbed. And, they've had plenty of time to get well. These are professional athletes. Mm-hmm. So you of course, there's going to be some that haven't been doing what they're supposed to do. But I mean, my experience with these guys is they're professional athletes. They want to play. They're competitive guys. It's not like they've been sitting around, eating and drinking beer and laying on the sofa.
Yeah.
I think most of them have done what they've had to do.
Yeah.
Now, having said all that, okay, going into it, I think, going into training camp, we're all looking pretty good. Now, here's the rub. No matter what they've done, and no matter what they're going to do in training camp, it's not going to be like playing a real game. So when we talk about a player that's injured, he's had surgery or he's been out for a while with a significant injury, and we do treatment, then we do rehab, and then the last part of the rehab process, that last 10%, we talk about return to play. Well, part of the return to play is actually playing. So when you put that particular player back on the floor that has been out for a long time, there's nothing that we could have done to prepare him for the game. He has to actually play in games to get into game shape, okay, mentally and physically, because a regular game is so much more powerful and faster than anything that we can create in practice. And probably, your audience is going, well, why is that? Well, for one thing is your best guys are playing against their best guys. Okay? So unless you have the 10 best players in the league to go 5-on-5 against each other, there's going to be differences there. The second thing is if a player's dogging it defensively in practice, what are you going to do? Yank him out of practice? You can't. You need him. But in a game, that's different, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the player doesn't want to be embarrassed by have the coach pull him out of the game, so he's going to play harder in games, and he can in most of the time in practice. I mean, I've been with some teams that are, especially during the Riley era, extremely competitive in practices, and some other coaches too. I mean, we had fights on the court. You know what I mean? Scrimmages and stuff. Guys, can get their juices going. Yeah. But those are the things I think that the fans need to look at. Be a little bit patient. Guys are going to be rusty, but everybody is in the same boat. That's my take on it.
So, Garrett, what would have been your message once the pandemic hit? The NBA shut down. There was the possibility that they were going to start up around now. That it was always sort of talked about as the target, early July-ish. What would have been your message to the guys to stay in shape? I talked to some guys like Kevin Love, for example. He didn't even have a hoop in his house, these guys are stuck in their house. They can't go to the gym. They can't go to, work out, whatever, unless they have it in their house. Right. So that's a big difference too now than a regular day.
For some, I mean, there's other guys that have, the full blown thing going for them. But, I think there's always a way. I've always said right from the beginning of this that whatever the NBA does, that's what the rest of the world should do.
Yeah.
I have tremendous confidence in Adam Silver and the rest of his people. The NBA always does the right thing for the players. They really do. Above all the other leagues, and that's not a knock on any of the other professional sports, but the NBA really has had a great relationship overall with the players, and they understand that the players are the product, and they put the product first. And so you have the best and the brightest either working with the NBA or the NBA is talking to those people. And so this is new territory for everyone. So that NBA people are talking to the brightest people in the world, and they're getting advice on how to do what it is that you just asked me. And my advice would be to follow the advice of the people that they're talking to. If I was still in the league, this would be new territory for me. Quarantine is one thing, but if you haven't tested positive, you should get out.
Mhm.
Get out of the house. Just take the road less traveled, though. Don't go where people are.
Mhm.
Okay, so you can go find a field, and do interval training. You can run sprints. You can do
Mhm.
chain. The big thing
Mhm.
is if you ran as fast as you could in a straight line, you probably never get hurt. Okay,
Yeah.
the way you get hurt is trying to slow down from
Yeah.
running fast. And the other thing the body doesn't like is torque, is turning,
Mhm.
changing directions. But you can go find yourself a field. You can get yourself a personal trainer, and
Mhm.
that person wears a mask, and you go out into an open area
Mhm.
and do all sorts of things. There's a lot of functional movements that you can mimic, functional movements in the particular sport that you play in. And so for the audience to think that the league shut down and everybody went home and just hung out and didn't do anything, I don't think that would be true.
Mhm.
I mean, I would have been on the phone even in our off season, without COVID-19.
Mhm.
I was on the phone every 2 or 3 days
Yeah.
with,
Yeah.
with a player, and if not an actual conversation, an exchange of text messages. Hey, I'm just checking in. How's it going? What kind of shape you in? You have any aches and pains? Anything you need? I'm sure that there was strong communication between management and players, sports medicine staff and players,
Mm.
players and other players. Okay,
Yeah.
and so I think you're going to be surprised. I mean, these are great, really well trained athletes.
Yeah.
This is like taking a greyhound or a thoroughbred racehorse and saying, okay, you can't race. Well, they still want to run around.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
want to do stuff. I mean, the
Yeah.
greyhounds is not going to go lay down. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that there's an innate thing that these athletes have that they've been working probably more than you would think.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. Well, I mean, only you could give a perspective like that, Gary, with all your years in the league and experience working with these guys. I mean, I remember going in the summer and you would be in your office. You'd have guys on the table. It looked like the regular season. I mean, I know you took vacation like everyone else, but it doesn't stop, right? It's like 24/7 almost.
we were basically almost 365 days a year. The
Yeah.
training room
Yeah.
was open. Somebody
Yeah.
always needed something. Now,
Yeah.
I was there most of the time. I did take 3 weeks, supposed to get 4 weeks, but I could never find 4 weeks. Okay, but my contract had said 4-week vacation, but that never existed.
Yeah.
But I used to take 3 weeks off. But
Mhm.
just because I took 3 weeks off didn't mean that there wasn't anybody in the training room. I mean,
Yeah.
especially my later years as the staff grew. When I first started, I was a one-man show,
Yeah.
but there was no place to go anyway.
Right.
We didn't have a practice site.
Right. Yeah.
We would meet at World's Gym in Venice Beach, and lift weights, and sometimes go down the Strand in Manhattan Beach and run on the Strand, or go out to UCLA and run on the track and do stuff. Then all of a sudden you build a practice site, you have a brick and mortar building,
Yeah.
and now everybody expects you to be there all the time.
Right.
You
Right.
know?
Yeah. Well, times have certainly changed in
Yeah.
that way, right?
So the staffs are big, and there's always somebody available,
Right.
pretty much year round now.
Right. So, Gary, last thing I want to talk about is an important subject. You were front and center during Magic Johnson's return to the NBA after his 4-year, sudden retirement after contracting the HIV virus, right? And there was so much misinformation and downright panic, right, during that time. There was a lot of fear of the unknown then, and there's a lot of fear of the unknown now, and there's a lot of panic now. And you wrote very eloquently in your Vitti report early is not to panic, you know. So what is similar now from then, you know, with this? I know completely different viruses, but did we learn any lessons from what happened then in the whole HIV scare, and especially your personal experience having to deal with it with Magic?
Well, trying to compare the HIV virus with the coronavirus there's really no comparison, other than they're both RNA viruses. So there's DNA viruses or RNA viruses, and they're both an RNA virus. There's more differences than there are similarities in the sense that the coronavirus is extremely contagious. The HIV virus is extremely difficult to get. You have to go out and get it. Now, back then, at least what we thought was that the HIV virus was a fatal virus. You're going to die, and you're going to die an ugly death. The coronavirus is not that fatal. It is for people with comorbidity, especially the aged, with comorbidity. So you're talking about apples and oranges here, but let's just talk about there's a virus out there, okay, and there's a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you handle this pandemic? Once again, I have tremendous faith in the NBA. Trust me, they look at every single angle. And, they've decided that they want to go, that not only do they want to play, but they can play. They've decided that they can create a situation, which is what we're calling the bubble,
Mm-hmm.
okay, in which they can compete. Now, having said that, when they made that decision, there was different circumstances than there are right now. So we have a spike going on right now, and it's spiking in Orlando, which is where the bubble is.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to your question, did we learn anything? Well, yeah, what we did learn was not to panic, okay? Because the initial reaction when Magic announced was panic. I don't want to play with him. He's going to give us this disease, blah, blah, blah. And so we learned that, and I commend David Stern. Dave was a tough guy. We didn't always see eye to eye, but I commend him on how he handled, the Magic Johnson HIV situation. David went out, educated himself. He educated everyone in the league, from the owners right down to the ball boys. Okay? And he made great decisions under extreme pressure, sponsorship pressure, legal issues, violations of civil liberties. I mean, people don't really realize, what the kind of thing that he was under at the time. Because he laid that groundwork and then he handed the reins off to Adam, people have great trust in Adam and the rest of the league that they're going to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the right thing? So now, they've created this bubble. And in theory, let's talk about this. So you get tested, and if you test negative, then you go into the bubble. So in theory, everybody that's inside of the bubble is not only asymptomatic, they're not infected.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good start. All right. Now, how do you poke a hole in the bubble? Because now that you're in the bubble, you're fine.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we know you're fine. Everybody that you come in contact, has been tested. Okay, so there's no virus inside the bubble. So the only way that you can poke a hole in the bubble is somebody from inside the bubble goes outside the bubble and then comes back in, or somebody that was outside the bubble comes inside the bubble. And then once they go out of the bubble or they come in from out of the bubble, you don't know what they're bringing with them.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so in theory, you're going to start with all the NBA people being, infection free.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you do about all the Orlando people that are coming in and out of the bubble for food service and cleaning,
Mm-hmm.
and doing all the other things that they do. And knowing the NBA the way, I don't know how they're going to do this, but knowing the NBA the way I do, I'm sure that they're already convinced that they're going to have positive cases of coronavirus.
Mm-hmm.
And once they do, they have a plan of action to take care of that, okay, which is to quarantine that person. Now, how long do you quarantine them for? How many, negative tests do they have before they can come back into, come out of quarantine and back into the bubble? One of the things that I thought was amusing to me was I was reading some of the guidelines that you could play ping pong, but you can't play doubles. I don't.
Yeah.
I think somebody, as much faith as I have with them, somebody missed the boat
Right.
on that one. You're going to let them play contact basketball with each other, but they can't play ping pong next to each other. To me, that one didn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
But everything else pretty much makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then the question is that, if they start having, rampant infection, at what point do you pull the plug on the thing?
Mm.
And I'm not sure anybody has that answer. They may have that answer worked out already, and they're not telling you, telling us, or they're saying that they don't know, and they really don't know. But because it's new territory, so as they proceed, they'll reach a point of like critical mass, and they'll say, okay, we've gotten to a point where we can no longer function and put on a product that's safe and competitive and enjoyable. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, then they pull the plug and they blew 150 million, doing it.
Yeah.
I think it's a very courageous thing that the NBA.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're all being extremely optimistic, and we're all, like you said, believing that they have talked to every expert. They've looked at every contingency, every problem that could come up, and what they're going to do about it, taking all the precautions. I mean, just in the amount of material that I've received, and I go down there next month, they'll leave, in my opinion, no stone unturned. And I've talked to some of my colleagues down there now, and it is a lockdown situation. I mean, you couldn't pierce that bubble with like a torpedo, It's like, forget about it. So
I'd like to say something about the NBA people that are going there, the players, the coaches, the staff people, the NBA people.
Mm-hmm.
Think about the sacrifice that they're making. Okay, they're taking 3 months of their life, okay, away from their family, their friends, their routines. And let's talk about the players, for instance. These are young, virulent, vibrant men, full of testosterone. I mean, you're going to coop them up in a bubble for 3 months, and they've agreed to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, God bless these people. I haven't seen anything in the media that really congratulates the effort that the NBA is putting, not just the NBA, but them first, and then all the people that are doing what the NBA is asking them to do.
Mm-hmm.
This is a great sacrifice. Now, granted, it's not going to war.
Right.
I mean, that's the extreme sacrifice of our armed forces. But, for the viewing pleasure of the public, I mean, look what's happening with MLS. Okay, so if your audience doesn't know, so the soccer went down to Orlando, and they're basically the guinea pig. They're the first ones in, and it's not going too well for them.
Yeah, they just pulled a team today. Dallas got pulled from the entire thing.
Yeah, and so they're going into something here, the NBA is going into something that's not a slam dunk. And I think you have to congratulate these people and appreciate everything that they're doing, starting with Adam Silver. and down to all the players and ownership and management and staff people. I mean, this is a big thing. It's historic.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being the first one in the media to say that on my podcast, because I haven't heard that either, quite honestly. And I'm going to be one of those people. I'm going to be there for 7 weeks. Yeah. So that was a tough sell at home, I got to tell you. And I'm a little nervous about it, but I know I got you and my friends and everyone that I'll be working with down there will all be in the same boat. So that helps a little bit, right?
One of the things that you'll have, and you'll find this out when you retire, I know you know it now, but it'll even be more so, is you end up with stories, okay? And this is going to be,
right.
I would strongly suggest everybody that's in the bubble keeps a journal, and you don't have to write in it every single day. I talk about this in the book that I never kept a journal.
Yeah.
And I look back and I really regret it because I have forgotten much more than I remember. I remember things like when I was writing the book, stuff that I didn't remember. And now I'm walking the dog with my wife and something comes up and I tell her a story. And she goes, "That was great. Why didn't you put it in the book?" I said, "Because I didn't remember it until just now." And so, you don't have to write things all the time, but when something significant happens, something funny, something sad, something great, write it down, okay? And because you never know, years from now, you'll look back, or someone else will look back, your great-grandchildren will look back at this experience that you're going through. It's not one that I would want to do. I wouldn't choose this, but if I was still in the league, I wouldn't have felt like I had a choice. I mean, I just would have done it.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, tell us the name of your book so everybody can get it out right from you.
It's 32 years of titles and tears from the best seat in the house. You can go to vittibook.com or you can go to Amazon. The subtitle is what I learned about happiness, greatness, leadership, and the evolution of sports science. And as you know, the book really isn't about me at all. It's a bunch of life's lessons that I learned working with some of the greatest athletes and greatest coaches in the game. I mean, Jerry West, Pat Riley, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Kobe Bryant, Shaq, Magic, all of them. I was very fortunate. I had a great run, man.
Yeah, you did. And we were there side by side, man. I just talked on Michael Cooper's podcast about, and I've told you this, but if it wasn't for you, I would not have had the career that I had, honestly, because you were the gatekeeper, and it was your locker room, your training room, and for some unknown reason, which will probably stay between us somehow, you let me in and trusted me. So I'm forever grateful to you for that. Thank you.
You just said the key word. I trusted you. Okay, but you earned that trust, and I will say this, that what you did it the right way. You were a pro, and you had a good intuition and a good feel for where you could be and not be, and how long you could be there. And, your whole thing was to be there, but like not be noticed.
Yeah, like a little Jewish fly on the wall kind of thing, right? With my Italian brother.
I mentioned you in the book about when you started. I don't know. You had a like these bandolera cameras. You know what I mean?
And the Jew
it was just you. And then by the time I retired, you had a staff of people. You had cameras everywhere in the arena.
Right.
All digital, all hooked up to remote buttons, and you didn't have any of that. You were just looking through a lens, and pushing a button with your finger. When you started, you had so much equipment. When you travel with us, you used to bring your own dolly.
Yeah, that's true. Well, it's like you, right? The 12 plus 2 plus 1 days, and you were the one. So that grew to be like 31 at least.
Yeah, it did.
Oh my God. Well, Gary, listen, man, it's so great. Obviously, just seeing you reminiscing, but getting your perspective, your professional viewpoint about this very unique situation, to say the least. And if I can get a postcard out of the bubble, I will mail you one. From there. But we'll be in touch from down there, man. Thank you so
would
much.
like that. I would like that. You can always email me or text me.
I know,
Okay?
Jim. I know.
That'll come through infection free. But Andy, thanks for having me. Love to you and your family and your audience. And I wish everybody well. Stay safe, stay healthy, and together, if we all do the right thing, we'll get through this.
Yeah. Yep.
Even if we don't do the right thing, we'll get through it, but it's going to take longer and it's going to be more painful.
Yes, thanks so much, Gary. And we're going to take a break now. I'm going to come back with the Bleacher Report's Howard Beck. And thank you so much, Gary. You take care. See you sometime soon. Okay, buddy.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, welcome back to the Legends of Sport podcast, episode 2 of Restarting the Clock. Got my good friend, the great journalist from Bleacher Report, Howard Beck. How are you? How are you, my friend?
I'm doing all right, Andy. Thank you. How are you?
Well, I'm doing pretty good. Getting myself ready to go to the bubble in about 4 or 5 weeks. So that should be interesting. And I've been listening to everything and everybody, and most notably to your Full 48 podcast, where you had Zach Binney and Carl Bergstrom on this week, right? And Howard, there's been so much talk about what could go wrong, right? And all the, every inconceivable possible outcome of a bad roll of the dice down there in Orlando. So and we just had Gary Vitti on previous to you, and Gary was very eloquent in talking about how he believes that the NBA has taken every possible precaution above and beyond what really needs to be done down there. So, we're going to air this the second week that the guys are in Orlando. Let's be total optimists here and hope that everything is going well so far. So let's turn it around, okay? Let's talk about what good is going to come out of this crazy restart of the NBA. This, I don't want to call it an asterisk season, but this unique season. What, in your view, is going to be what lingers and stays with us forever?
Well, let's first of all, unfair position to put me in following Gary Vitti. That's an impossible act to follow.
Exactly.
He's way more interesting, way more informed on health matters, and just he's a better storyteller, frankly. So let's go with, since this is going to run, once the bubble's actually underway. Look, let's assume that everything has so far to that point been great, and let's go best case scenario here. Mm-hmm. Best case scenario. The NBA gets through this with minimal to no players or personnel infected by the virus. Mm-hmm. They crown a champion. Every series is compelling. Minimal injuries, although I think we have to expect some given the long layoff. Mm-hmm. And we get high-level basketball that approximates what we're all used to seeing. Mm-hmm. That this looks and feels like a normal-ish postseason. Mm-hmm. No fans in the stands. We understand that. Everybody in the same place. No home court advantage. No away disadvantage.
Right.
A lot of things that we're used to seeing baked into the NBA that just won't be part of this postseason. But if the basketball looks like NBA playoff quality basketball and a champion is crowned sometime in early to mid-October, and minimal guys get hurt or get taken out by the virus at some point, then I think everybody will walk away feeling pretty great about it. And that scenario is on the table. It is in the realm of possibility. That is an idealized scenario. And somewhere along the way, by the way, over the course of those months, mm-hmm. the NBA will use all the attention and its platform and all that time on national TV to elevate and amplify the Black Lives Matter discussion, mm-hmm. to help educate and inform, mm-hmm. To give its players that much bigger of a platform to talk about the issues that they've been discussing in various other forums and places for the last several weeks, but will have a much, much bigger platform when the entire country and a lot of the world is watching the playoffs. Mm. So there's a a phenomenal opportunity here for the league to defy the odds on some level with the virus, to reestablish a sense of at least pseudo normalcy. I don't want to say normalcy because there is no normal until this virus is eradicated or until we've got a vaccine. So let's not be, naive or Pollyannish about it.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of people who are very, very sick and struggling with this across the country, including in Florida, including in the very county that the NBA is operating in. So we should all be sensitive to that. And perhaps there's an opportunity for the NBA to help in that regard too, whether it's funding testing, whether it's helping establish, alternative clinics if things are overrun in the area. The NBA's got some vast resources now, which brings me to the last piece of this, which is, the NBA is losing money regardless this season, this calendar year, and this restart is about, among other things, very much trying to defray those losses or to reduce those losses. There's $900 million to $1 billion at stake here. And so if everything goes off as planned, they've also allowed themselves to be that much more sustainable. Because if you decided not to do this, you're foregoing a lot of money, and that's going to have ramifications going into next season, which also has some question marks hovering over it. Mm-hmm. There is a best case scenario here where the league can do all of those things, meet a lot of goals, both on and off the court, and help their bottom line too a little.
Yeah. Well, I think it's safe to say money, yes, is important. Did money drive this? Was it the determining factor? I can't possibly believe that was the case. I mean, Adam Silver would never put people's health in jeopardy, staff, players, coaches, everybody. This would make no sense, right? So it's a complicated issue, obviously. Who do you think this situation, this bubble situation with no home court advantage, which team do you think benefits the most, or which couple of teams? Like, do you expect to see a surprise here in the playoffs, like some team come out of nowhere that maybe wouldn't have done that, in a normal scenario?
It's the most fun, like, barstool, barbershop, water cooler, whatever, pick your analogy and location of choice.
That's why I got you, buddy. That's why we're talking here,
It is the most fun one to contemplate. And to me, as someone who I love being able to build a good, solid case, even if at times maybe I don't completely buy, like, this is the answer. I'll say, well, here's the strongest case for this, right? This is one, Andy, where, like, there is no case. Like, there really isn't. Like, you cannot tell me definitively this favors the Lakers or favors the Bucks or favors a dark horse like the Thunder or like the Pacers or something. Like, there's no definitive case to be made because we have too many unknowns. Guys have been off for 3.5 months. It's the longest these guys have gone without playing basketball in their adult lives, maybe their lives period, since they were children. And we don't know what the effects of that will be. We don't know how long it will take to reestablish team chemistry, because, if we're going to buy into all of the things that we usually say in, March and April and May, where we talk about teams peaking at the right time and teams having they're getting their chemistry settled and their rotation settled and being in a rhythm and having momentum. If those things matter at all, and I believe they do, well, all that stuff's off the table. There's no momentum. There's no rhythm. There's no anything. They're starting from scratch with a rushed training camp and then 8 seeding games, many of which will be played against teams that have no shot at the playoffs. That they're going to be like glorified exhibition games, and they're going to go from glorified exhibition games to playoff games within days. It's all very unpredictable. Now, that said, this is a league where talent rules, right? If you have elite talent, and we even talk about this in terms of playoff series, most of the time, 9 times out of 10, you can predict the team that had the best player on the floor is the one that wins. So maybe the Bucks supporting cast people might question, but they've got Giannis. He's going to be the best player on the court in almost every series, certainly in the East for sure. And so you favor them. Talent rules in this league. So I think that still applies. However, I think it was a scout who said this to me last week, that the Bucks are really a rhythm team, right? Let's take them for an example. They really rise and fall on Giannis. Like, he's like, Chris Middleton is an all-star, but he's not a guy who you can run an offense through, who you can build an offense around. It's all Giannis. He doesn't have a Paul George the way Kawhi Leonard does, and he doesn't. Anthony Davis and LeBron have each other. Giannis has this perfectly calibrated supporting cast, and so the rhythm that they establish of Giannis attacking, drawing in the defense, and finding open guys or attacking the hoop, that is a timing and rhythm thing. And so what this one scout was suggesting to me is maybe that is a team that is hurt more so by the layoff, whereas like the Lakers, their rhythm could be all over the map. The roll guys, the shooters, everybody could be completely out of whack. But hell, just give the ball to LeBron, give the ball to AD, let those two play a two-man game, and they're going to get a lot done just on that alone, right?
Yeah.
Lou Williams of the Clippers is just a walking bucket, right? Plus they have Paul George and Kawhi. So certain teams, I think, maybe can just get away with being out of rhythm more so than others. But I had Kenny Smith from TNT on my podcast recently too. And when I asked him for his list of contenders, he went 9 deep.
Yeah, I know. I heard that.
We were talking 3 teams when the season suspended. It was Lakers, Clippers, Bucks. That's it. End of story, end of sentence, end of debate.
Yeah.
And maybe a few dark horses that people might toy with. Kenny flat out listed 9 teams, all the way down to the Dallas Mavericks.
Yeah. Well, actually, he listed 8, and you said, "What about Houston? You forgot Houston." And he said, "Oh yeah, put Houston in there for sure." He picked Dallas over Houston. That was interesting.
I think it was just a momentary oversight.
Kenny also mentioned that was a great episode, by the way, because Kenny has so much insight as a former player, and he's just so connected to the league. And I love hearing him talk. He's got that Brooklyn thing going, which I love. But Kenny also talked about like guys like John Morant and Zion and, these rookies who really aren't going to be rookies now. It's almost like they went through the summer and we're starting the season over again. Gary Vitti talked about that we're almost like, in November, even though it's July, if you look at a regular NBA year, right? So how much different are these guys going to be? They're not going to be like the wild-eyed rookies really anymore. I mean, yes, they had 65 games under their belt, give or take. But is that going to play a factor, do you think, at all?
Well, it may. Now, let's remember, too, so these are the 2 rookies that will be focused on the most. And, there's some others, Tyler Hero and Kendrick Nunn with Miami. There will be other guys who will be keeping an eye on for those that same set of circumstances, the same reasoning. But with Zion and Ja, whichever of them makes the playoffs, it's one or the other, and they're going to be the 8th seed, and they're facing LeBron and Anthony Davis in the first round, and they're probably out before too long, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it was a really interesting case that Kenny Smith made, which is that even though these guys haven't been playing for months, this is not the normal offseason, right? The normal thing is you have your rookie season, you have the summer to work on your game. You get in the gym with your trainer. You work with the assistant coaches from your team. You get in the weight room. You study film. You do all these things in the off season, and you come back and you're that much better as a sophomore than you were as a rookie. And my response to Kenny was, well, hold on a sec. These guys didn't have any of that. They've all been shut in their houses. A lot of guys had no access to gyms at all.
Mm-hmm.
He said, no. But they went through the majority of a season, learned a bunch of lessons along the way, have all this game tape now of themselves playing at this level against the league, all this film they can study now. These months off, if these guys have been diligent the way that you expect them to have been, they're learning even though they weren't in the gym. Especially for the guys who do have access to a ball and a basket somewhere, you could still be working on individual things in your game, right? You can still be working on your form, your shot, your ball handling. There are drills you can do even in isolation. And so, yes, Kenny's case was, and it was a really interesting one, is that they'll come back as if they are second-year players now. Now, I think that's probably more the case for Ja than Zion, because Zion, of course, only played, 23 games or whatever it was, mostly a lost season. But, yeah, I'll be fascinated to see if there is a level up for these guys when we see them again in Orlando. And, of course, we've also seen the photos of Zion that popped on Instagram or social media recently where it looks like he slimmed down some too. So that's a big deal.
Yeah, that's interesting because like him and Jokic and James Harden, the top 3 guys that come to my mind. I mean, they took this time to shed some pounds. I mean, I didn't even recognize Jokic when I saw that picture of him.
Crazy.
That was amazing. But, you can't do that during a regular season. If anything, you're packing weight on because, you rarely have time you can't diet, right? And you're not practicing that much and you're traveling and the hours are terrible and all that stuff. So that's going to be It's going to be interesting, right? For sure. So tell me, Howard, what's your plan? How are you going to report? How are we going to hear from you? What's going to happen?
Yeah. Andy, this is going to be, probably the most challenging postseason from a reporter standpoint that I've seen in my 23 years of covering the league, and that I think all of my peers have seen. So the way that the league has set this up, you mentioned at the top, you're going into the bubble, right? Mm-hmm. Well, the bubble is a restricted number of people. And for print media, it's 10. So there are 10 print reporters who are going in. Mm-hmm. I am not among them. I did not apply. I decided this was not for me, because going into the bubble from the print media side meant a commitment to essentially the entire run. And that could be up to 94 days. You and I both have families. And of course, that is not just for the players and teams and NBA personnel, but for us too. That is a burden and a serious just sacrifice that you have to contemplate. And on top of that, listen, even if you're in the bubble and being tested every day, you still have to get there first. You're still exposing yourself to the virus potentially first, just by leaving the protective bubble of your home.
Yeah.
And so now the payoff for that would be access. The whole point of being a reporter, especially at a time like the playoffs, the NBA playoffs, which are phenomenal, you could write about basketball from anywhere in theory, right? You could sit there at home, watch a game, analyze it. But the point of being a reporter means talking to people. It means being around people. Mm-hmm. Sometimes formally, sometimes informally, sometimes happenstance. Sometimes it's running into an assistant coach at a coffee house near the arena during the finals, which would happen to me many times during the Warriors-Cleveland series or multiple finals. Our great stories rely on great interviews and insight, and sometimes it's, again, on the record, off the record. Our whole job is trying to tease out the things that you can't get as a viewer from home. We're trying to find the stories beneath the surface and, insight, explanations, anecdotes, exchanges between players on the off day and what they said that allowed them to kind of figure out the way to attack. And it's all this stuff, right? That's reporting. That's what sports writers do. And to not be there is tough, but to be there is also going to be tough. So the bubble, 10 people in the bubble on the print reporter side. They still will not be able to do what we would normally do, which is, hey, practice ends, peel off with a guy and chit chat with him on the side outside of the press conference format, or get somebody, walking down the hallway, or set up something for later. Because of safety concerns, because of health concerns, everybody in the bubble pretty much has to stay away from each other, and especially NBA teams. So we can't, not we, because I'm not going to the bubble, but the print media in the bubble, they can't just, amble over to the team hotel and go meet up with Frank Vogel or Rob Pelinka from the Lakers. They can't just go and schedule like an off-site meeting somewhere to do a one-on-one interview or a podcast. It's against the rules. The NBA is strictly prohibiting that kind of contact, not because they want to inhibit the media and our reporting, but because they need to do absolutely everything possible other than in games when guys have to be smashing into each other to otherwise keep them apart, and keep them especially apart from everybody who's not in the NBA. So yeah, you're tested every day. Yeah, you're in the bubble. Yeah, in theory, this means you are as safe as anybody else in that bubble. But the NBA's philosophy is keep everybody away from each other as much as possible. Keep the distance. This is not to say that the reporters, and there's some really talented people going down, that they won't be able to find a way around that and get some one-on-one time. But I think it's going to be very difficult. And it means that trade-off, the cost, which is over $50,000, the time away from family, the being sequestered, the strangeness of that experience. And again, there is still risk of leaving your home and getting on a plane and everything else to go into the bubble. I just think that for me personally, that was not a worthwhile trade-off given the restrictions on access. There's a secondary group 2, that can go down, not be in the bubble, will be tested twice a week before, to be able to go to games, but the only access you have is the games. So the group 1, the bubble people, can go into the press conference. No one-on-one time, but you'll be in the same room for a press conference. Group 2, not the bubble, not tested every day, will have access to just the press conferences via Zoom, and can go into the arena, sit at a higher level, further from the court, further from players, and then you can at least see the games in person.
Mm-hmm.
The value of that, it's not like there's no value to it, but it's negligible. The real value of being present is the ability to talk to people, especially outside of press conferences. So I have considered going down for maybe the finals as part of Group 2. Because Group 1, you have to go into the beginning or not at all. So that's a possibility, but that's still a ways off. The finals won't start till late September, and by then hopefully we'll see. Is Florida more under control by then? Is there less risk? Because as of now, the idea of getting on a plane or even jumping in a car and driving the East Coast down there, it's not an attractive possibility right now. So how do I do my job? I mean, it's a lot of Zoom calls. The NBA is going to do it. They've got a whole system plan set up for teams to do daily Zoom calls with media from all over the country, because most of us will be doing this from home. The vast majority of NBA media will be covering these playoffs from their living rooms.
Well, I'll wave to you. If I could,
and I'll wish you luck, Andy, in the bubble, because I don't envy you on the whole. I think it's going to be tough, but you're a pro, and I'm no doubt in my mind that you would be going.
Well, you know what, Howard, you're right. It's a huge sacrifice, and it was a family decision, quite frankly, that I had to talk to my wife and my 2 daughters that are home, and my other kids got to chime in on it. And I was given the choice whether I wanted to go or not. And I want to work, and I haven't taken a picture since March 11th, so I'm kind of itching to get back to my game. And the experience of it is going to be unique, to say the least, second to none. But when you talk about getting on a plane and getting there, that's the most daunting thing. My wife literally went out and bought me like a hazmat suit, which I don't think I'm going to wear. But can you imagine going through the airport?
Once you go through TSA with that.
Yeah, you're holding like the thing, like the astronauts, getting onto the capsule. But I might appease her. But I'll probably wear the visor and definitely an N90 mask and gloves and all that, and sequester myself in my seat and just hang on and get there. That's the best I could do.
This is for you, this is tougher. I mean, like print media, we can decide to cover this remotely, get people on the phone, join in the Zoom calls that the NBA will set up with coaches and players, all of that. I have that option.
Yeah.
Like you don't. Like you can't take photos off the TV. Like that's there's like certain jobs have to be done on site. And so,
Listen, man, you and I, we've been through a lot together, and we've seen a lot in our NBA lives. And this will definitely be another chapter in each of our books down the road. Right.
Yeah. Strange one.
Yeah. Well, Howard, thanks so much for joining us, man, and your perspective. And hopefully, you can join us somewhere down the road during this whole experience, maybe as we get closer to playoffs or what have you, and things get sort of, more, a little bit, the stakes are a little bit higher, and we're looking at like a regular conference finals and a finals and all that stuff. And I'd love to pick your brain about all that too down the road.
No, of course, Andy. Always a pleasure. Love chatting with you always, my friend. Would love to come back on later down the road here. And who knows, maybe we can record this like 10 feet apart within the bubble in late September, October during the finals. Yeah. If the NBA allows that, although they probably wouldn't. So we'll probably still have to do it over Zoom, but I can wave from you from the upper deck of the arena. So.
There you go. Maybe you should also cheer from there, because according, there won't be any fans. So, you got to have some noise in there. Maybe the media.
No cheering in the press box.
Yeah.
No cheering in the press box.
Well, so great to see you. Say hi to the family for me, and enjoy your summer, because yours will be a lot different than mine.
No doubt. Be safe, Andy. Wishing you the best down there. Take care.
Thanks, Howard. You're the man. Take care.
You too.
Wow, really great connecting with Gary Vitti and Howard Beck and hearing their perspectives on this unique situation with the NBA bubble starting up in Orlando. Thanks to them both for always bringing such great content to our podcast. Thanks to everyone listening for downloading and continuing to support our podcast. You can find us on the LA Times app, Apple, Spotify, and anywhere you can find your favorite podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at Legends of Sport, Twitter at Legends_of Sport. Our blog is legendsofsport.blog, and our YouTube and TikTok channels, Legends of Sport. Thanks as always to my producer and researcher, Veronica Ahn. We'll be back next week with episode 3 of our Restarting the Clock series on the Legends of Sport podcast, with more terrific guests as the teams prepare to resume the pandemic-interrupted season in Orlando. Until then, stay well and stay safe. Take care.